nights and in my dreams, they're always in my mind. These songs of hobbits, dwarves and men, and elves, come close your eyes, you can see them too.
I haven't played the new Star Wars RPGs. I don't know if people like them or not, actually. They look pretty impressive, but they started doing this thing where they started getting really ridiculous, releasing new editions of the Star Wars RPG. Like, they started really coming out with them like every 6 months. It got fucking ridiculous. There was D20, there was D20 Revised, where they it was, D20 edition was essentially broken. There was D20 Revised, and then they released a book that was kind of like longer than it was tall. Then that was the new version, and so I really don't know if people like that version or not, but the version I played, I think the version that everyone really loves, I don't really like it, is the West End Games version of Star Wars, the RPG. Maybe it was because it was so well supported. There was a lot of source books for that one, but I always thought it was really easily min-maxed. Maybe that was the appeal, I don't know. But you learn a lot as a DM in terms of how much players are willing to cooperate with plot convenience, or how do I better put this? You learn a lot how real people would act in a situation that's different from how people would act in a movie. I'll try to explain. This isn't so much one story as it is kind of an amalgamation of my experience playing the Star Wars RPG. So, what I eventually learned after several years of having really, really bad Star Wars experience was that if you're running a Star Wars RPG, either everyone needs to be a Jedi, or nobody should be a Jedi. Maybe that's like a common rule and I don't know about it. It took me a couple years to finally stumble upon that one, because here's the problem. And here's almost an identical situation that actually came up. I set a campaign during basically Shadows of the Empire, which is the time between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. It's basically the Empire at its height, and it's a really good time to kind of involve people because the main heroes of Star Wars are off kind of doing their own things. So they're not going to get involved, and there's a lot of room that, guys like... there's a lot of room for stuff to happen that doesn't really impact the world at large. So the first campaign I did was, they were, what was it? I think what they were doing is they were trying to escape Hoth or something like that, and so this was like immediately after, they were doing their own thing and they were going to get a mission to go steal some plants. And I can't remember the details, it was so long ago, but what I do remember is I was going to have this bit where Darth Vader kind of chases them off. And again, this is another rule you should probably follow. If you're following any kind of movie series or book series or anything that has well-known characters, never involve them in your RPG. Like, I remember, like, if you're doing Wheel of Time, if you're doing Conan the Barbarian, or if you're doing Star Wars, if you're doing, I'm trying to think, like, maybe Black Company, or anything with well-known characters, anything with characters that people like to follow, like Star Trek. You never want to put, like, Captain Kirk in Star Trek or something like that, a Star Trek RPG. So, because players will fuck with them. And so me, again, being young and not knowing shit, I'm like, okay, well, all they're going to do is, they're going to be lifting off from Hoth, and they're going to blast off, and I'm just going to say, like, oh, Darth Vader comes out, and he, like, shakes his fist at you as you leave. It's kind of like that scene, and it's kind of like a scene in Empire Strikes Back, where the Millennium Falcon turns around and flies off, and they're like... So I'm like, well, as you're flying off, you see this retinue of Imperial soldiers come out, led by a man in black, and they're like, oh, fuck, Darth Vader. Wheel around, we're going to kill this motherfucker. So that's what they do. So they wheel around the ship, and they start arming turbo lasers, and they start shooting down at fucking Vader. And she's like, do. And so I'm like, okay, roll to hit Vader. And so they shoot down, and I wasn't going to let Vader get killed. But I'm like, okay, you scatter soldiers, but somehow, like, Vader, like, holds his hand up, and he wrenches your turbo laser to the side, and he escapes. And so they're like, no, fuck that. We're going to pound this base and we're going to kill this. Land the ship. We're going to kill this guy. So, of course, since there's a major villain, they're like, we could end the war right now. And they land the ship. And it didn't end well. Basically what I did was I said, Vader's nowhere to be seen when you get in there. And they start running around. And I'm like, I'm trying to really hint that maybe they should leave. Like, the base shudders violently as more turbo lasers from the Star Destroyers pound the ship and pound the base. And they're like, we need to find Vader. We want to fight this guy. And I'm like, you're not going to find Vader, guys. Just leave. And so, it's kind of one of those DM fiat things where you just have to, you're trying to hint that maybe they should really go. But they really want to. They want to fight the big bad, so they're turning turbo lasers on the guy. They're turning their turrets on him, saying like, he can't block this with his lightsaber, bitch, and like, never do it. Never involve Darth Vader in your campaign. It's never going to end well, because they're going to want to fight him, and that kind of branches into the next thing I was doing. So basically, what I ended up doing was, we started doing like I think it was New Jedi Order. We were playing something else. It was a setting where there were a lot more Jedi around, like, the Skywalker had started his thing on Yavin, and so there's a lot more Jedi, and so we had like 2 Jedi, I think, and everyone else, there was like a smuggler, there was I can't remember, there was like a bounty hunter, of course there's a guy who dresses like Boba Fett, he's got the armor, he's got the jetpack, whatever. So there's like 4 of us, and there's like 2 Jedi. So I do this bit where they're getting together, and they're trying to steal something else from an Imperial regiment and whatever. So of course there's Sith Lords there, because of course when there's Jedi you got to have Sith Lords, and so they're like, every guy plays a Jedi is going to get his rocks off in a lightsaber duel. So what happens is I go, okay, the alarm goes off and the doors open, and there's a number of stormtroopers. And behind them, there's 2 guys in robes, and they whip out their lightsabers, and they point at you, and they challenge you, and, whatever. So, of course, the Jedis go, well, we pull our lightsabers, and we accept the challenge. And everyone else immediately goes, we turn our blasters on the Sith Lords. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, fuck this. While they're fighting with the Jedi, we can shoot them in the back. And I'm like, okay. So like the guys start fighting, and the other guys start shooting into melee, because they figure if they can tag one of the Sith Lords in the back of the head with a blaster bolt, they'll drop. And I'm like, and I'm kind of going, that's not really fair. And they go, fuck fair, they're Sith Lords, they're Imperials, fuck them. And I'm like, but that's not very cinematic. And I'm like, and they're like, really? And I go, like, I gave you stormtroopers, like, I thought what you were going to do is, the Jedi were going to fight the Sith Lords, and you guys were going to fight the stormtroopers, and then, and they're like, no, fuck you. Why are we going to fuck around with fucking stormtroopers? We want to fight the fucking Sith Lords. They're the guys in charge. And I go, yeah, but that you don't see that in the movies. And they're like, so? Like if Luke Skywalker was fighting Darth Vader and Han Solo was around, you really think Han Solo would just stand back there and let it go? And I'm like, well, yeah. And they're like, no, Han Solo would shoot Darth Vader in the back if he had the chance. He tried to shoot him on Yavin. Remember that? And I'm like, yeah, well, he blocked it with his hand. He's like, yeah, but if Luke Skywalker was there fighting with him, he'd have fucking shot Darth Vader. He wouldn't have been able to do that hand shit with... And I'm like, this isn't right. You know that. And they're like, yeah, fuck you. We're going to do this fucking thing. And then, so I'm like, this, it wasn't how I wanted it to be. So like, and you can still have a fight because the stormtroopers were still, I mean, they're better than they are in the movies. They're actually pretty good shots in the game. So they ignored the stormtroopers, but the Sith Lords didn't last very long. And then we kind of had this thing where one of the Sith Lords dropped. So they got shot. The guy with the machine gun got lucky and tagged him. And so there was one Sith Lord left. And so everyone kind of turned on this guy. So all of a sudden this guy was fighting off 2 Jedi. And this was before the prequels. So I was like, what? Now there's 2 Jedi on 1 Sith Lord. And then you're shooting at him besides that. That's not fair. So I'm sitting there whining, and I'm like, this isn't. I wanted like one-on-one duels, and even the Jedi were kind of like, we were kind of expecting like one-on-ones. Like we kind of wanted to do this on our own, and the guys are like, dude, they're Sith Lords. They're gonna hit us with fucking lightning. If you lose, we're fucked. And so I'm like, damn it. And you just never saw that in the movies, really. Not until the prequels, and there was like a 2-on-1 fight. But then that guy had 2 lightsabers, so it was okay. And then there was like Dooku, and then it was 2-on, whatever. So I don't know. In the movies, you always saw the one-on-one fighting. You never saw the asshole smuggler taking pot shots with a rifle at Darth Vader while he was trying to have a fair fight with Luke. They kind of had it written that way, of course, because that's always an awkward situation, like as everyone else everyone else is kind of sitting there jerking off, because it really becomes a problem. That's why everyone has to be a Jedi, or nobody has to be a Jedi, because the problem always comes up where you've got this major villain. Okay, let's just go with Darth Vader. Let's say, and it's not, but let's say there's this major Sith Lord, or the Emperor, or something like that, and you're really looking forward to this major showdown, because at the end, it's inevitable that the party is going to come across the final boss, and there's going to be a fight. And the thing is, when the fight starts, in every kind of Star Wars thing, it almost always kind of boils down to a one-on-one. Because there's one Sith Lord, there's one guy in charge, and there's kind of a hero who steps forward and sword fights the guy. Not always. I mean, I'm sure you'll give me examples, but that's just the way it kind of works. So it's you got to really think outside the box to find a satisfying final encounter, because it kind of comes down to the fact that you enter the throne room, and this guy in a black robe steps down the stairs, and there's 5 of you, and but cinematically the Jedi should step forward, because really the Jedi almost all the time is the star. In terms of the action, the Jedi is pretty much the leader, almost always. So that becomes the problem, where the other guys don't want to feel left out, and they shouldn't feel left out. So you've got to find an encounter that does that somehow, but all of a sudden, it's the Jedi wants a fair fight, basically, and the Sith Lord is kind of fucked if you don't have it, because the other guys what do you expect them to do? They're not going to let their boy get whopped down by a really powerful Sith Lord. They're going to help. So you got to find a way to maybe have them split up, but they're never going to leave. They're never going to leave till like there's one guy going in to face the big bad. They're all going to want to face the big bad. So it's just kind of weird where especially if there's like 2 Jedi, or so they, like I said, either all Jedi or no Jedi, because there's always this really awkward moment where the guy really, really wants his one-on-one, and nobody's going to give it to him. Even if he asks really nice, if he's like, seriously, this is like what I've been fighting for. And then there's always the risk the guy loses. So there's a certain amount of cinematic convenience that's present in Star Wars that you really have to work. The players, I think, maybe even have to cooperate a little bit to make that magic work. But to really get around that, you kind of have to do the all or nothing thing. The problem with the all thing is that fights kind of turn into a massive lightsaber melee. If you got 5 guys on 5 guys, all swinging lightsabers like maniacs, chopping limbs off and shit. Or no Jedi, which it's kind of maybe a little boring, because without Jedi are kind of the movers and shakers of the Star Wars universe, and it kind of feels a little empty without them, because that everyone, a lot of people want to play Han Solo. He's the cool guy. A lot of people want to play Lando. He's the really cool guy. But the Jedi is the hero. He's the guy who really, when it comes down to it, is the guy who he's the guy who faces down with Darth Vader. He's the guy who finishes the whole thing. And so, it's natural to want to be the hero of the story. It's kind of a problem I've always felt. There's a Buffy the Vampire Slayer RPG, and I never played that. But it always kind of seemed to be a problem to me, where somebody's got to play a Slayer, and then the other players don't. So it always kind of felt like there was a inequity there, where there's somebody who gets to play the star, and then everyone else is just kind of the Scooby Gang, and it's not. It would seem to me like nobody wants to play Robin. You know, everyone wants to be Batman. Everyone wants to, almost everyone wants to be Luke Skywalker, I mean, of course, I'm the kind of guy who wants to play Han Solo because Han Solo's a fucking badass. But he's not going to lightsaber fight with the bad guy at the end. Han Solo never really had to face... His big showdown with Boba Fett is he's blind and he accidentally whacks Boba Fett in the jetpack with a gaffy stick or whatever the fuck it is. So, he didn't exactly have the most dignified final showdown with the bad guy. It was Luke Skywalker. He was always the guy with the big fight. But that was the funny thing. So I don't know. Maybe you guys... I would like to give Star Wars another chance, really, but the thing is, you really gotta have a good DM. I mean, it helps to have a good DM with any game, of course, but you gotta have a DM with a really firm grasp of how to handle the various roles the players play. And I think the players really have to cooperate and maybe hang up the gang mentality a little bit. But I always had that problem where everyone wanted to be important, so everyone wanted to be the guy who took down the Sith Lord. So that was always the thing. One funny thing, another funny story that almost always happens to Wookiees. There's almost always a guy who wants to play a Wookiee. Because, of course, Chewbacca's cool. The thing is, in the West End game, Star Wars especially, it was really hard to hurt the Wookiee. Wookiees, by their nature, are very armored. What's the dog doing? Oreo! Oreo! This is getting in trouble. Okay. By their nature, especially in West End games, Wookiees are really hard to injure. So they've got this thing where when they get hit, you roll against their body trait, and if you can't beat the roll on the body trait, they take damage. But Wookiees take an absurd amount of punishment, and Wookiee players almost always max out their physical traits. Because of course, that's what they do. So there was a time when there was a Sith Lord, and the Wookiee was fucking wailing on this Sith Lord barehanded. He was just fucking pissed. I think he had a weapon, or he had a vibro axe or something like that. So the Wookiee fucking steps forward and he's fighting the Sith Lord dude. So the Sith Lord has enough of this shit, so he hits the Wookiee with his lightsaber. But the Wookiee's body rating is so high that he actually absorbs the lightsaber hit. It didn't hurt him. The Wookiee could literally get shot in the chest with a blaster rifle and it wouldn't hurt. And he's like, I can't explain it. Seriously, the guy would roll dead red bullseye on the stormtrooper, shoot him right in the chest. He's like, ugh, and just, that was it. I was like, it was really ridiculous how Wookiees could take that much punishment. And I guess that was just why you played a Wookiee, was you were just the powerhouse. You were meant to be able to kind of wade through blaster fire, but after a while, it kind of got ridiculous when a Sith Lord would basically baseball swing his lightsaber into a Wookiee, and the Wookiee would be like, ugh. Those fucking things cut through solid steel. And you're telling me this fucking Wookiee's hair is dense enough to shrug off a lightsaber attack? Fuck you. There was a time though when I think it was the Wookiee was on a speeder, like a speeder bike, and so somebody shot that fucking speeder bike with a really high-powered blaster rifle, and the speeder bike exploded, and he burst into a ball of flame, and I'm like, okay, roll damage, and so he rolls a ton of damage, and I'm like, okay, I hurt the Wookiee, and so there's all this fire. This happens a lot, I find. There's always the Wookiee gets exploded, somebody throws a grenade at the Wookiee, or somebody sets the Wookiee on fire, or something like that. So I'm like, okay, the Wookiee emerges from this fiery wreck, he's hurt, but he's got all his hair burned off, and so we have a hairless Wookiee, and so, well, of course, right? Hair burns. So I'm like, well, Wookiee emerges from the fucking fire, and his hair's burned off, and he smells like a fucking burnt dog. So all of a sudden we got this problem, we got this hairless fucking Wookiee, and you just try to imagine that for a second, where you got a Wookiee with all his hair burned off, and so we have this Wookiee, he's got overalls on, and he's nude, and this Wookiee was really fucking miserable for a month. We were all making fun of him for having no hair. He's kind of growing back, a little stubble. That always happens though. So yeah, that was just my take on Star Wars and the dramatic inconvenience of either all Jedi or no Jedi and the hairless Wookiees.